Good morning, everybody. Welcome to week 2, lecture 10, income and substitution effects of a price change. In this lecture, we are going to look at what happens to the budget line when the income of the consumer changes. At the same time, we're going to look at what happens to the budget line when the price changes. Now, what we're going to do here is we're going to vary the price of one good, assuming that the consumer consumes only two commodities. Now we're going to vary the price of one good, and then we see what will be the effect of that change in price on the budget line. Then after that, we're going to vary the income of the consumer, holding the prices of the two goods constant, and then we see what happens to the budget line. Then later, we're going to move on to the angle curve. We're going to try to derive the angle curve as well as the income consumption curves. Now, the income consumption curves are normally obtained when the income of the consumer changes. So it is just the locus of point of successive points of tangency between the budget line and the income. So we look at all the equilibrium point between the tangency condition between the indifference curves and the budget line, and then we try to trace all those points to get the income consumption curve. Then the income consumption curve is used to derive the angle curve. Later, we're going to look at how changes in prices affect the budget line. And we're going to wrap up this lecture with the income and substitution effect of a price change. What happens to the consumer when the price of a commodity increases? Of course, we have covered this one earlier. You know, when the price of the consumer, when the price of a good increases, the consumer's purchasing power falls. The consumer's welfare reduces. Because of that reduction in welfare, the increase in price would imply that the consumer is going to buy less of the good. And that is the income effect. So we're going to take a look at the income, both the income and the substitution effect of a price change. Then we see whether the price change or the price increase will lead to an increase in demand or a decrease in demand. Now remember, the total effect is the sum of the income and the substitution effect. Now the direction of the demand of the good as the price falls or increases depends on the income and substitution effect. Depends on the magnitude of the income and substitution effect. Which of the two effects outweighs each other will show the direction of the demand. Let's say, for example, if the income effect, if the negative income effect outweighs the positive income effect, then the resulting or the total effect is going to be negative. Or if the positive income effect outweighs the negative income effect, then the total effect is going to be positive. So these are the things that we're going to take a look at today. So let's go ahead and get started. Now, when the income of the consumer increases, what happens is that the consumer is going to be on a new budget line. So here, if the income of the consumer increases, it does not lead to a complete rotation of the curve, but it leads to what? A shift in the curve. The budget constraint is going to shift outwards if the income of the consumer increases. Now, what happens if the income of the consumer falls? That answer is simple. If the income of the consumer falls, it means that the consumer is going to be on a lower budget line than before. So the budget line is going to shift inwards. It is going to be lower than the previous budget line. So when the budget line shifts as a result of changes in income, it is going to be parallel to the old budget line. So as you can see here, we have the old budget line, and then after the income increase, after the increase in the income of the consumer, what happens is that the budget line shifts from this red line to the green line. And this green line is the new budget line, which is parallel to the old budget line. As you can see here, the indifference curve is tangential to the old budget line. And at that particular point, the consumer is going to consume a given amount of X and then a given amount of Y. So remember that if the income of the consumer changes, it is not going to affect the slope of the budget line. The slope of the budget line remains unchanged. The slope of the budget line does not change when the income of the consumer changes. The budget line, however, shifts either outward if there is an increase in income or inward if there is a decrease in income. Remember, when the income of the consumer increases, the budget line shifts outwards. And when the income of the consumer falls, the budget line shifts inwards towards the origin. In other words, it shifts towards the left. But what we're going to see here is the relative prices of the two goods remains constant. That is to say, the marginal rate of substitution remains constant as well when the income of the consumer changes. So there is no change in the marginal rate of substitution. There is no change in the relative prices of the two goods when the income of the consumer changes. So this is what happens when we have an increase in the income of the consumer. It does not affect the slope of the budget line, but it does lead to a shift in the budget line. If there is an increase in income, the budget line will shift outwards. If there is a fall in income, the budget line will shift inwards. Now, in the case of normal goods, the income consumption curve is upward sloping in the case of normal goods. So normal goods are goods that are consumed in large quantities as the income of the consumer increases. In other words, we say for all normal goods, the demand for them increases when the consumer's income increases. If you experience an increase in income, you will decide to buy more of organic food in order to stay healthy than go to this restaurant to eat junk food. You decide to maybe try to cook at home, prepare very good food instead of you buying McDonald's or going to Burger King. So, as a matter of fact, when your income increases, the demand for all those goods, those healthy goods, healthy food, sorry, the demand for all those healthy foods will go up. So, those ones are referred to as normal goods. So, as the income of the consumer increases, the demand for all the normal goods increases. So, but if the consumption of, let's say, good X and Y falls as the income of the consumer increases, then both goods are referred to as inferior goods. But if both the demand for X and Y, assuming that the consumer consumes two goods, increases when the income increases, then we can safely say that both goods are normal goods. Now, if you can see there, I try to trace all the points of tangency between the indifference curve and the budget line. Now, as the consumer experience an increase in income, he also is on a higher indifference curve, which is indifference curve U2. And when his income increases again further, then it moves again to a higher indifference curve, which is U3. So if we trace all those successive points of tangency between the budget line and indifference curve, we are going to get a curve which is referred to as the income consumption curve. The income consumption curve. So it is just the locus of point for all points of tangency between the budget line and indifference curve. The budget line and the indifference curve. So that is referred to as the income consumption curve. Now, in some textbooks, they say it is called the income offer curve. It's the same thing as the income consumption curve. Okay. So now we're gonna derive the angle curve from this income consumption curve. Now, the angle curve is just a graph showing the relationship between the demand for a good and the income of the consumer. Now, for a normal good, the angle curve is upward sloping. At the same time, the income consumption curve is also upward sloping for all normal goods because the consumer consumes more of the good when the income increases. As the income of the consumer increases, it consumes more of that particular good. So the income consumption curve is going to be upward sloping. Now the angle curve was attributed to a German statistician and economist called Ernst Engel, who lived between 1821 and 1896. So it tried to develop a relationship between the expenditure of a particular, the expenditure on goods and the incomes of the consumer. So you find out that when people become richer, they consume less amount of food. The demand for food decreases when as an individual's income continues to increase. Now for billionaires, if you look at billionaires, you try to do like a research on that, try to look at the consumption habit of or the consumption level of billionaires and maybe poor people, you tend to see that the income of the billionaire spent on good, on food relative to the income of a poor person spent on food, you'll see a very big difference there. So for very rich people, the proportion of their income spent on food is very, very small relative to the poor people. So Engel tried to develop this relationship. So this particular curve, the Engel curve, was named after this famous economist and statistician who lived between 1821 and 1896. So now let's look at normal and inferior goods. Now we're going to look at the income consumption curve here for all normal goods and then inferior goods. But in the case of inferior goods here, if we look at this income consumption curve, we notice that the successive points of tangency are all to the left of the original point of tangency. Now, the original point of tangency there is point A, right? And the next point of tangency is point B, which is to the left of A. Now, remember in the previous graph, the successive point of tangency, what? To the right, right? Of the original one. So you see, the income consumption curve here is going to be what? Upward sloping instead of downward sloping. Okay? And so this one is going to be downward sloping instead of upward sloping. It slopes downwards from left to right. Sorry. Now, let's look at what is the income consumption curve here. What is the meaning of that? Now, it refers to the set of all optimal bundles. Remember, we say optimal bundles here. These are just the point of tangency between the different curves and the budget line. So, it is just a set of all optimal bundles of X and Y consumed as the income of the consumer changes. Now here, remember, we are holding the prices of the goods constant. The price of the goods do not change. What actually changes here is the income of the consumer. That is why you see the budget line shifting from one particular position to the next. So the line that connects all the equilibrium points is known as the income consumption curve. That is the line that connects all those successive points of tangency between the indifference curves and the budget line. Now, the Engel curve shows the relationship between the consumer's income and the quantity of a good consumed, holding all prices of goods constant. Now, when we try to draw the Engel curve here, we are only going to look at the expenditure on a single good. So we are going to obtain the price quantity relationship here for only one good. So this means that the price of the other good is held constant. The price of the other good is held constant. So this is just a relationship between the income of the consumer and the demand of the good. The demand of the good. Okay? Now let us try to derive the angle curve here. As you can see here, now this is the angle curve for a normal good. The angle curve for a normal good is upward sloping. It is upward sloping because the consumer consumes more of the good as his income increases. So we expect the angle curve to be upward sloping. So if we look at the budget line here, now this is the budget line, the original budget line, right? The original budget line is this, and then it shifts. It shifts to what? To the new budget line, right? So there is a complete shift here, right? From this old budget line, let's say this is what? Let's just say this is, right? MM, right? Let's just call it MM, right? And then it shifts to what? Let's say BB, right? BB. Okay? So the budget line shifts to BB because of what? An increase in the income of the consumer. Now, what happens if the income falls? Are we going to have a shift outwards when the income falls? Certainly not. The answer is no. We're going to have a shift inwards towards the origin. So instead of the budget line shifting to the right, when the it is going to shift to the left of the original budget line when there is a fall in income. So if there is a fall in income, it's going to look like this. Let's say this was the original budget line, right? And then we have this as our indifference curve, right? Now you know what the indifference curve is, right? It shows the consumer's preferences, for the two goods. And if the income of the consumer falls, what will happen here is, if it falls, now the consumer is now less well off than before because his income has fallen. The fall in income means there is what? A decline in what? A decline in wealth. The wealth of the consumer has fallen. So because it has fallen, right? So what will happen is the budget line is going to shift towards the left. It is going to be parallel to this old budget line, right? It's going to shift to the left. And then once it shifts to the left, right, you have the new indifference curve, which is that, right? You have the new indifference curve, which is that. So as a matter of fact here, you see that when there is a fall in the income, what happens is the budget line is gonna shift to the left, not to the right, please. It is going to shift to the left. It is not going to shift outwards. Okay? That is simple. This is not rocket science. It is just as easy as that. When your income increases, your budget line is going to shift to the right. And when your income falls, your budget line will shift to the left. It is not going to shift to the right. Now, the reason why the angle curve is upward sloping is because this is a normal good. And for a normal good, when the income of the consumer increases, is going to consume more of the normal good. Is going to consume more of the normal good. Say, for example, I experience an increase in income. What is going to happen? If I used to go to restaurants to eat junk food, then I'll stop eating junk food. I'll decide to either cook at home or maybe buy organic food. So the demand for organic food will go up because my income has increased. You understand? So this is what happened for all normal goods. When the income increases, the demand for them also increases. And so we expect the angle curve to be upward sloping. Now let's look at the inferior good here, the case of the inferior good. Now if you look at this inferior good here, you will notice that when the income of the consumer increases, what happens to the demand for good X? Now remember here, we are talking about two goods here, good Y and good X, right? So there are two goods, good Y and good X. But when we are talking about, when we are dealing with this, when we're trying to analyze the effect of a changes in income on the quantity demanded, we are looking at what? We are holding what? We are holding the prices constant. The prices are held constant. So if we look at this offer curve here, or the income consumption curve, we notice that it is sloping downwards instead of upwards. And the successive points of tangency between the indifference curve and the budget line occur to the left of the original tangency point. Now, the original tangency point was point A. And then the new tangency point is at point B, sorry. Now, look at M1 here. M1 is $1,000 when the income of the consumer is $1,000, right? And then it consumes 10 units of good X and then 30 units of good Y, right? At a given utility of what? $300. But remember here, what we did here is the utility, let's say, E of XY is just equals to XY. Remember, I gave you this one in one of the, I don't know whether it is the quiz or the problem sets, and most of you are not able to do that. It was so easy and straightforward. It was really easy. If you have something like let's say U1 equals to 200, right? So they want you to draw a difference curve here. It is just so easy. You start from 2. X equals to 2. If X is 2, you have U equals XY. If X equals to 2, then Y is going to be what? Y is going to be what? Y is just going to be 100. As simple as that. All you need to do is you just say U1 here, 200, equals to what? To Y. And then what is Y? You find the value of Y, which is just 100. And so the points now, XY, will be equals to what? 2 and then 100. So that is 1 point for your indifference curve. You can do that for the next one, maybe X equals to 4, and then the next one is going to be like 50 or so. So for X equals to 4, you're going to have Y, which is 50, something like that. So as a matter of fact, just plot like 2 points, that's enough. You plot those 2 points and then you join them, you will see a curve. And then you just represent that with this utility equals to 200. So that is easy. So that is what we have here. So U1 equals to 300, right? So if U1 equals to 300 and then the utility is just XY, now if X amount, if 10 units is consumed here, then we have a utility of 300, then it means 300 divided by 10 is going to give us 30, right? So 30 times 10 is just 300, right? That one is well understood. And now let's look at a utility of 350. For a utility of 350, we consume 7 units of X, and then obviously we're going to, in order for us to determine how much of Y we consume or the consumer consumes, we have to divide that utility by 7, and that gives us 50. Okay, so that is just 50. So 7 times 50 is just 350, right? Now look at this one. If the income of the consumer increases, what happens here? The consumer is going to be on a higher indifference curve. He has experienced an increase in his purchasing power. But look at what happens here. This is so strange. What happens? We should expect what? An increase in what? Let's say the demand for the good when your income increases. But now, when the income of this consumer increases, what happens here is the demand for the good decreases from 10 to 7. So he is now going to consume less of X. But what happens here? When the income of the consumer increases, what happens to good Y? It consumes more of good Y. So that tells us that good Y is a normal good. But in this case, good X is not. Whereas good Y is a normal good, good X is not a normal good. Good X is an inferior good because it consumes less of good X when its income increases. So as a matter of fact here, the income consumption curve is going to be downward sloping. So if we trace all those points of tangency between the indifference curves and the budget line to another curve here, we're going to have an angle curve here, which is downward sloping. Now you notice that here, this angle curve shows what? The relationship between the income of the consumer and the quantity of the good consumed. So here the consumer is only going to spend on good X. Now good X is the inferior good. So good X is what? Inferior. Good X is inferior. Why is it inferior? Because it consumes less of it when his income increases. So it is an inferior good. But what happens to good Y? It consumes more of good Y when his income increases. So good Y is a normal good. I hope you get the point I'm making. So here, the inferior good is good X, and the normal good is good Y, because the consumer consumes more of it. Now, if you can see here, what happens here? The consumption of good Y goes up from 30 to 50, right? So that is a normal good. But what happens to good X? The consumption falls when the consumer's income increases. So it's an inferior good. Okay? So the good that is normal here is good Y, and the good that is inferior is good X. Okay? And so it has a downward sloping angle curve. It has a downward sloping angle curve. Remember, the angle curve for all inferior goods is downward sloping. It is not upward sloping. Now let's look at changes in prices and the budget line. What is a change? What is the effect of what? What is the effect of a change in price on the budget line? How does the budget line affected when the price changes? Now, when the price change, a change in price will what? Is it going to shift the budget line? Certainly not. It is not going to shift the budget line. But what is going to happen here is when the price of a good changes, it is going to lead to a complete rotation of the budget line. In other words, the budget line is going to pivot outwards or inwards. It is either going to pivot outwards. It will pivot outwards if the price falls. If there is a fall in price, then the budget line will rotate outwards. It is not going to rotate inwards, okay? If there is an increase in the price, it is going to rotate inwards. Oh, now, you see the difference here. Previously, we said when the income of the consumer increases, the budget line is going to shift outwards, right? It's going to shift to the right, right? But here, when the price of the good falls, the budget line is going to rotate outwards. It's going to pivot outwards, right? So, as you can see here, you notice that the price was originally $6. Now we are looking at one good here, good X, right? Now remember, when we say the price of good X here is changing, we are looking at what? Changes in the intercept for the, we go straight to the horizontal axis and see how those intercept changes, right? Now, the rotation, the complete rotation occurs around what? The y-axis here. It occurs around the y-axis. So what will happen here is the y-axis is the y-axis represents good y, right? And then this is good y. Sorry. Oh, this is good y. And then this is what? Good x, right? The x-axis. So if there is a change in price here, or let's say a fall in price, if there is a fall in price, what will happen? This budget line, let's say the price of X falls from $6 to $4, right? So the budget line is going to rotate outwards. It's going to pivot outwards, right? It is not going to pivot inwards. Now, if the price of good X increases, if it increases to $8, if it increases to $8, what will happen here? It means, one, the consumer's welfare has reduced, right? So the budget line is going to rotate inwards here, as you can see, for a fall in price. Now remember, this is different from those relative prices we deal with last time. Now, you know, when we have relative prices, the price of one good relative to the price of the other, if there is an increase in the relative price, you see that the line, the increase, what? The line rotates outwards, right? So this is different from this one, because here we are only looking at the price of a single good. We are not looking at the price of X relative to the price of Y, okay? So we are only looking at the price of X. So that is why you see here, because some of you tend to ask the question, Oh, we saw that one earlier. The budget line just rotates outwards for an increase in relative prices. It is different from this one. Here we are looking at a single price. Okay, we're looking at a single price here. So if the price here falls, then the budget line is going to rotate outwards or to the right. Okay, so what happens here is the slope of the budget line is going to change here. So when the price of a good changes, it is going to affect the slope. And again, it is also going to affect, it's also going to lead to what? A rotation of the budget line, right? The budget line will rotate to another position. So it is not like the effect of a change in income on the budget line. For the effect of a change in income, we only saw the budget line shifting either to the left or the right, okay? But here, it is going to rotate. So if there is a fall, if there is a fall in price, it's going to pivot outwards. If there is an increase in price, it is going to rotate inwards, as you saw here, right? So as we see here, we notice that the budget line rotates inwards because of a decline, because of an increase in price. So the increase in price means the budget line is going to rotate inwards. And if we look at the point of tangency here between the budget line and the difference curves, if we trace that one, we're going to get the price consumption curve. In some textbook, they call it the price offer curve, but it's the same thing. So the price consumption curve or the price offer curve. Now, if you can say price offer curve is just the same, okay? Just changes in terminologies, but it's just the same. Now, look at the income here. The income is just 120. So we divide 120 by 6. The price here is 6 is just 20. So this consumer is going to consume 20 units of X when the price is 6. Now, if the price falls, what do you expect? You expect him to consume more of X, right? So as you can see here, you see the demand increases to 30. Or if the price increases, you expect him to consume less, right? Which is that, which is 15. So he's going to consume less. Okay. So now, if you look at this one, just take a look at this one and then compare it with the previous one that we did under prices and the gains from trade, right? If you say that the budget line is going to rotate outwards for an increase in price, then it is wrong for this case. The reason why it is wrong, if we put this one, let's say this increase in price, EX equals to $8. Let's say we put it up here, right? Where this green line is, right? And then let's say we'll take this $4, we'll put it down here, pivot inwards. So if you divide that $8, the 120 by 8, you're gonna have 15, right? So when the price increases, are you going to experience an increase in? So that will be 15, right? So what you will notice is that there is, when the price increases, there is what? A fall in the demand for X. Sorry, there is the demand for good X what? Will be 15 here instead of 30. But remember, this point here is is higher than 20. So 15 cannot be where 30 is. Okay. So similarly, 30 cannot be where 15 is. So that is why we see when the price of the good falls, the budget line is going to rotate inwards, and then when the price falls, the budget line is going to rotate outwards, and then when the price increases, it's going to rotate inwards. Okay, so it rotates inwards when the price increases and outwards when the price falls. Okay. Now let's look at the case of Y. Now, when the price of Y changes or increases again, the budget line is going to rotate outward, but this time the rotation is going to occur around the x-axis, not the y-axis, right? So you see the budget line rotates outwards because of a fall in price, right? And then for an increase in price from $4 to $6, the budget line rotates inwards. Okay. Now we have this price consumption curve. Now let's look at ordinary and given good. Remember we did a Marshallian demand curve, this and that, right? So, and here we are going to look at some weird stuff here. Some very, very weird, very strange, the given goods. In fact, these given goods are very rare. Well, normally they call them the Veblen goods. So for these particular goods, this type of goods, the demand for them increases as the price of the good increases. So normally they call them articles of ostentation. You know, things like sometimes people maybe value some goods, pay. There are some people who pay, you know, a higher price for a good when the price of them increases. Sometimes they call them articles, goods of ostentation, right? Sometimes some people attach value to the price of the good. So if the price of the good is high, they tend to value that particular good more than when the price is low. So as a matter of fact, if the price of the good increases, they're going to buy more of the good than when the price falls. So as a matter of fact here, this is going to violate the law of demand, which says that when the price increases, the demand should fall. And when the price falls, we expect the demand to increase. So in this particular case here, the price consumption curve for a normal good is going to be upward sloping. The price consumption curve for a normal good is going to be upward sloping. And so if we trace all those successive points of tangency, and we're going to have what is referred to as the price consumption curve here, which is the green line. And in this top graph. So now let's look at the graph at the bottom here. Now, if we try to trace all those points to this particular graph, we see that the price here, the price of good X here, varies inversely with the quantity of good X. So this particular good is referred to as an ordinary good. So it obeys the law of demand, which says that when the price increases, demand will fall, and when the price falls, the demand will increase. So for these ordinary goods, the demand curve is downward sloping. It is downward sloping. Now, the demand for the good falls as the price increases, and then it increases as the price falls. Okay. Now, given goods are goods for which the demand for them increases as the price increases. So sometimes they are backward, they have a backward bending demand curve, and they have a portion that is positively sloped, and then some other portion that is negative slope. So that's why the demand curve there is backward bending, as in the case of this one. Now, when you try to draw the demand curve here, we have to hold the price, let's say, of one good constant, and then the income also constant. The price and the income is constant, and then we vary px. So what is going to happen to the demand? Now, here the demand for good x, we say is what? Is upward sloping, right? So, or it's backward bending. So in this case, this good is referred to as a given good. So good X is a given good. The demand curve violates the law of demand here. So as you can see here, when the price of good X increases, right, the demand for it also increases. When the price of good X falls, the demand for good X falls. Now this leads us to the income and substitution effects. Now, when the price of a good changes, it has two separate effects, the income effect and the substitution effect. Now, the substitution effect focuses mainly on what? The price, the effect of the change in price. Now, here we look at what will happen to the consumption of the good as the price falls, holding the price of other goods, and then the utility of the consumer constant. Now, the utility of the consumer is going to L fixed. It's going to be constant. So we hold the consumer's utility as well as the price of the other good constant. And let's see what will be the effect of the increase in the price of good X on the quantity consumed, right? So that is the substitution effect. Now, if the price of good X increases, you expect also that the welfare of the consumer will decline, right? So we want to know what will be the effect on the consumption level of the good, and that is the income effect. So for the income effect here, we want to know what will happen to the consumption of the good when the price of the good increases, holding the prices of other goods constant. So for the income effect, we are going to hold the price of the other good constant, and then we try to analyze the effects of the changes in price, right, on the consumption level of the good. So the substitution effect can either be negative. The substitution effect is always negative for a fall in price. It is always negative, right? But you have the income effect, which is what? The substitution effect for a normal good is always negative, right? And then the income effect is always positive for a normal good. Okay? So you can go ahead and read that one. Take Price Theory and Application by Landsberg. Then make sure you go over it. That everything there is self-explanatory. So we don't have to be labeled on this one. So let's move straight to income effects. The income effect of a price change is just a change in the amount of a good consumer will buy as its welfare changes, holding the price of all other goods constant. Now, the price of other goods are held constant, right? And then we see what will happen when the price changes on the demand for the particular good, right? Now, again, the sum of the substitution effects and the income effect, now total effect here, is equals to the sum of the substitution effects and the income effects. So if we add those two, then we're going to get the total effect. Now, depending on the magnitude of the income or substitution effects, depend on those two magnitudes, then the change in the price of the good will either lead the consumption of the good to will either lead to a reduction in the consumption of the good or an increase in the consumption of the good. Now, if the substitution effect outweighs the income effect, then an increase in price will lead to a fall in the demand. Okay? If the substitution effect outweighs the negative substitution effect, outweighs the positive substitution effect, then the resulting total effect for a price change is going to be negative. On the other hand, if the positive income effect outweighs the negative substitution effect, then the effect of a fall in an increase in the price of good is going to be positive. So I'm going to stop so far, and we're going to try to wrap up producer and then perfect competitive farms and monopoly. And I'll have to make sure that we complete those ones this week, and hopefully by Wednesday we'll be able to just jump in straight to general equilibrium. Now, if you go to week 5, the notes, all the PowerPoint slides are there. And then the Edward box, and then the Walrasian atonement process. So make sure you go there and read, go over those PowerPoint slides, and then I'll see you again tomorrow. Bye for now.